this even come about, we have a group we meet we have a history group that we meet first Wednesday of the month. First Wednesday of the month, so if you're ever interested in the history of Harney County, we meet in the back of the museum at the annex. First Wednesday of the month, start to talk about history. And so how it started, Karen was here and Lynn Menz was here, and I got to tell them my story about the ghost. And finally, Lynn goes, I knew her. My uncle lived in that house. So we got to talking about, and she knew the girl I'm talking about. So that got into this, and then Karen thought this great idea was, why don't we do a program on this? And first I went, no. And then I got thinking about it, go, why not? Why not? Because I think I've heard other story people telling their stories. So that's how this has even come about. And we're going to have, museum has programs over the year about different things, history-wise, but we thought this would be really different. You want to go ahead?
Okay, so in the course of my time working back in the Western History Room, I've had a lot of people come in and ask about the history of their houses. And some people, in the course of talking to them about the history of their houses, mentioned kind of weird, spooky things that have gone on. So we've kind of collected together a few of the stories, and then I started doing a little bit of research on some other stories that have come out of Harney County. So I've got maybe half a dozen or so different things that I've run across, but the earliest account of any ghost story, haunting that I've found in Harney County was in the newspaper in 1893. It goes like this. Burns is never without a sensation of some kind, something of the mysterious, something hard of comprehension, something to make the blood circulate with lightning rapidity through the stomach, arms, legs, and feet. Burns's heart and brain is never very muchly moved in consequence of the supernatural or mysterious. Because of the absence of these two organs, so much desired in high society or the upper circles, but which Burns dispenses with, believing these organs to be superfluous to the well-being of the town. His or hers, or its ghost ship, reigns supreme in the old saloon building, now a butcher shop. This troubled spirit of the departed manifests its presence in various ways and attitudes. Sometimes it's a white cat, and makes its appearance at the east end of a counter running east and west in the building, leaps from the counter to the meat block, saws and cuts meat in the most approved style. When shot at, calls attention to the worthlessness of the gun and advises a change or heavier charge of powder. Sometimes it's a man with burning electric light eyes, and when called upon by Ballcroft to halt and give up the countersign, its ghost ship didn't halt. But neither did Bancroft, who made a hasty exit, appearing at the next saloon, and in a startled and almost inaudible voice gave a description of the monster which so much astonished the hearers that free drinks were set up all around, and a posse comitatus was organized to investigate. But upon investigation, his honor had disappeared and was probably in Chicago, taking in the World's Fair buildings. In a room of the building containing a bed which was occupied at intervals by some young fellows of the town, this did not seem to please the ghost, and it consequently put a stop to it. The boys, in the act of opening the door and turning the knob for that purpose, were astonished to find that the knob would be turned in the opposite direction. And like Aunt Jemima's plaster, the more they tried to open the door, it only closed the tighter. Becoming frightened, the boys would leave the building, and the ghost in peaceable possession, at least for that night. Sometimes they were not troubled in opening the door, but when in the act of turning down the blankets, they found such effort resisted, and the boys, not understanding the resistance, would make a second dive at the blankets. And suddenly the blankets would be thrown to one side, and his ghost ship would appear with flaming eyes and horrible contortions of the face, with a gun in one hand and a dirk in the other. This action of the ghost universally caused a hasty retreat of the disturbers of his rest. Now what puzzles the court, this office, and the citizens of the town is how to account for this mysterious visitor. So that's the earliest record of anything going on that I've found. There are other accounts of a house up near the Catholic Church. It was known historically as the Clevenger House, and it was built around the turn of the century for George Clevenger, who was a local undertaker. The house was built with 2 entrances, so many people think that he used one half of the building for his business, and then the other half was inhabited by the family. In 1932, on Halloween morning, the Thornburg family was living in the house, and Hilda Thornburg, the middle daughter, was separated from her husband, and she was staying there with her young children for a while. And her husband, Harry Riley, came to force her to go back to Portland with him. They had an argument, and he shot her and her father and seriously wounded the mother. Eventually was sent to prison for life. But ever since that time, people who have lived in the house have experienced strange happenings. We have a write-up about the house by someone who lived in there for a number of years, and they describe some of the happenings and the history of the house.
And just on a side note, I was talking to Joni Henry this morning, and she said that house, the last people who lived there, I believe, were the Leaches. And they said the last day they were leaving, and the dad never was really a believer. The last day they were leaving, there was a woman sitting on the edge of the bed saying, "Please don't go, we like you." and then Joni told the story, and I asked her to please come and I'd tell it. But she said many times in the upstairs window, they would see a woman looking out the window from the Catholic Church. So. And I always heard that.
I did babysit there.
Did you?
Yes, and it was creepy.
Yeah. So how was it creepy?
It just the feel.
Felt weird?
Yeah.
Yeah. I talked to one person who used to visit the house when they were growing up as a child, and they remember one time specifically when everyone was downstairs and there was a ball in the hallway up at the top of the stairs, and it just on its own sort of rolled down and bounced down the steps and rolled across the floor.
I'll go ahead and tell my story next, then we can fill in. But so we'll get to we bought the house, I think in 1960, right? The stone house, and I'll tell a little side story on it. It was a stone house. It was, we were in with the Russians about nuclear bombs, and my mother had to have a stone house. That was going to save us. But anyway, so we bought this stone house. And then I probably didn't start feeling things because I was young. And so when I was 7, 8, 9, I started, you'd hear things. Things that fall off the table. You could hear steps at night. But one day when I finally seen the 2 ghosts, my brother was on the dining room table in there, and I was out, it was dark, and I was at the window, and I could see my shadow out there. And these 2 shadows walked behind me. And at the time, and I've told this story many times, I thought it was a little girl and a teenage boy. So that's what I felt, that's what I seen. And so fast forward to 5 years ago, and I went the next step. I wanted to know who was haunting, and so I researched it out and found out the little girl was Carol K. McComb, and she died of cancer, a brain aneurysm in '56. But that's who I thought I seen, so I researched it even further. I found her gravesite at the cemetery, and I go visit once in a while, which may be weird. But and just today, and Karen, about a month ago, told me, "Jim, I think I found your teenage boy." And I said, "Oh, great." So I come up, and sure, I think there was a kid that accidentally hung himself or whatever in the back shop. They weren't related. And then I thought it was a teenage boy, and come to find out that McGrillis had accidentally hung himself in the shed behind the house we lived in. And for some reason, I think those 2 got together. But I mean, you know, so that's the way I feel.
Tell them where you lived.
Yeah, and then he lived in the back shed. Well, I've got a story coming, but I went up today and found his gravesite. So that could be weird, but I did. And then later, I was telling some of the stories. So I would get out of the show house down here, and I'd sprint home because I was scared of the dark. So I'd sprint all the way home to the house, and if anybody's living in 688 West Washington, go ahead and leave. Anyway, I'd sprint to that house, and the first couple of steps in the door, there was always somebody talking. And later, I'd go and I'd turn on all the damn lights, and finally, years ago, I got to think of, where in the hell were the rest of my family? How come I was always by myself? Well, my folks were at the Elks, but where in the hell were you?
I was a teenager.
Anyway, I was always by myself in this stupid house, and it was ghosts. But it wasn't scared, but it was uncomfortable. Let's just say. So a few years later, I was down in the basement, and I think this entity is totally different from the two. But my brother was with Bill Helbish, and they lived 2 houses away, and we had a dryer down in the basement. So I went down there to get some clothes or whatever, and there was this globe, shiny globe. You ever hear ghost stories and people see these globes? Well, I seen this damn globe, and I started screaming, and my brother said he could hear me 2 houses away. And I was so traumatized, I ran over there, and then I never talked much about it. And about 20 years ago, I was in Boise visiting him, and he goes, and by the way, why were you screaming? And I had forgotten all about this dang globe, and then I went, oh, I seen a globe in the basement. So I was so traumatized, I just put it out of my mind. But now I remember it like yesterday, this globe. And they heard me screaming. And
After you saw that, I really hated going down in that basement because the washer was down there too.
me too.
I didn't. I creeped down there.
Yeah.
I bet you talk about those 2. That explains the 2 shadows I saw one night.
Oh, you seen the shadows also?
Yeah, because Wendy and I were home and we had the bedroom downstairs and nobody else was home and the light was on up there and I seen these 2 shadows.
Well, that's
Now
the
I
teenage
know
boy
who
and the
to-
girl.
Yeah.
And I felt the one in the basement was a different
Yeah.
entity.
Yeah.
The other one's, yeah, it was unnerving, but that one in the basement
Yeah.
scared the bejesus out of me. So. And so that's my story. It's quick, but I tell that story all the time, and I hope it never changes. I don't know. But I truly believe what I seen. And then I went out and found the proof. And then on the side note, we were talking to Karen the other day about Carla Burnside lived in this house years later. And she's kind of not a believer, but she said something was in the basement.
Yeah, she went down in the basement one day to do her laundry. She didn't know anything about this program or anything about the history of the house. She went down into the basement to do her laundry. Her little dog went down with her. And all of a sudden, the hair on the dog's back rose up, and it just started barking and barking at something. And she just felt like this weird presence.
That
And
damn
she
entity.
just ran out of the basement, slammed the door, and she never went back to the basement the whole time she was there.
Yeah. And then Katie knew a couple archaeologists 10 years ago that rented that house from her. And they said they really didn't like going upstairs. But I don't know. But the basement to me was. But so that house has had some history with other people.
What year did the teenage boy die?
1960,
Okay.
and she died in 56.
Okay.
But I didn't start feeling things till, I was 60, I was 1, so, until I got older. And I don't know why they met up, they weren't related. And she actually died in the hospital across the street, and he died in the shed in the back. But and I seen him, and you seen him, so. Yeah. Anybody else got their own stories? Go ahead.
I actually came from Deschutes River Woods in Bend. I was there my whole childhood. I decided rebellious, 13 years old. We had a game closet sitting right in front of my room, and I decided to take my mom's Ouija board out of it. And I never believed the stories about Ouija boards. There was no
Well, we
way.
did them all the time too.
So I messed with it at night, and next morning at school, I always felt like there was something right on my back. Every time I looked behind me, there was nothing there. There wasn't even kids within 5 feet behind me. That night after school, I came home, just started watching TV, and then I went in my room to read some books before I went to bed. I always left my closet open. There was a ton of coats in there, and then all of a sudden I just saw just big red glowing eyes sitting just right between 2 coats that I never touch. I thought nothing of it, and then my room started getting really cold, and it was during the summer.
Now, wait a minute, you really didn't think anything of it?
At
I'd have been screaming.
first I thought nothing of it, but then my room started getting really cold in the
Yeah.
middle of the summer.
Because you hear that too all the time.
Yeah, so room started getting really cold. I couldn't sleep. The next night, I wake up to my big wooden dresser just shaking, and I had crystals and pocket knives that I collected all the time, along with a little dragon that held a letter opener. Everything came flying off of my dresser, and the letter opener, the blade, came out and landed right between my legs. My old mattress still has the hole right where that letter opener landed. It wasn't until about 4 months afterwards that I finally ended up moving out of there.
What the hell took so long?
Well, other than not ever opening my closet again after that night, I kept it closed all the time.
I mean, sometimes you believe, did that really just happen? I mean,
A lot of the times I was like, it just baffled me. I just couldn't believe it.
but I know how you feel. You kind of feel it. You kind of,
Yeah.
there's some
but
unnerving, something just kind of,
I've always had a connection with the supernatural aspect of life. When I was 3, my cat died in my bathroom from a heat stroke and heart attack. The day after, I would see him coming out of the bathroom, walking right past the TV, rubbed up against my legs behind the couch. I would look behind the couch. There was nothing there. I'd look under the couch. It wasn't there. So ever since I was 3, I've had a strong connection.
well, we talk about some of the family sees this stuff and some don't.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's about believing or something, but something, yes, half the family don't feel it or see it.
My mom's side of the family, they were actually, my grandmother had that gift as well. And my mother decided that she just wanted to be a witch in her teenager years. So she had all sorts of things and believed in all the ghost stuff too, because she's seen it and felt it. Her grandmother, she's felt her hand go on her shoulder and whisper in her ear, telling her that everything's going to be okay.
Well, I'll let these two finish their stories, because I'm starting to get freaked out already. So I'm not screaming to go to my car. Shannon and my sister have stories about not the stone house where we live,
Yeah.
It was a house that Mrs. Craddock, I don't know if
down on
anybody.
Adams.
Yeah, on Adams. I don't know if anybody remembers the Craddocks from way back when. This was 87 when we bought it. And nothing was odd in there for a couple years or so. And then things started happening. He had witnesses. My other daughter, she had the room that we think was Mrs. Craddock's room. And we still have the bedroom furniture. We bought it with the house. But Michelle had the furniture. And she also had a day bed. One time she was sleeping on the day bed and she woke up in the night or something and there were people talking in her bed. And then there was another time she was in her bed and it had a big closet, you know, with sliding doors. And some people were coming out and she said, "Don't come out, you're scaring me." So she had those kind of feelings. But I had heard that she had moved to Ontario to live with her sister, and I had heard that she died And she had said that she loved that house, and she came back.
Yeah.
Did you say Michelle felt somebody lay down in the bed with her?
Or sit on the edge of the bed.
Sit on
And-
the edge.
Yeah, and I felt that in my room too. So he had his arm out with the blanket over the top, and something pushed his arm down.
And didn't
No
something
screaming?
step on
No.
your slipper?
Yeah, and then, so you
Well,
tell your,
I worked in the woods, so I was up early in the morning, and I was going out to the kitchen. Somebody grabbed my bathrobe as I was walking by. And another time, they stepped on the back of my slipper and took her off my foot.
Dang.
but she was more playful.
Yeah.
And nobody was,
And that one time when Dallin was little,
no, let her tell that story. She was there. We were.
My son was in a walker, they had all hardwood floor, and he would go to the door of the bathroom and just laugh at the bathroom.
and he'd point.
And point in the bathroom and just laugh. But I saw we had those long phone cords, and I saw the phone cord go almost to a 90-degree angle and drop, and then just swing. And then I'd hear apples, sound like apples rolling on the roof, and just,
Well, John, when he
That was our, Michelle's boyfriend at the time. That's our son.
after we went to bed, he'd stay there and watch the sporting news late. And he said he could hear that, sound like someone throwing up on the roof and rolling down.
But she came home. I'm curious to know if anybody else has.
I think she
had
probably
that.
did.
Yeah. I do have a story about the house that Joni lived in. John and Michelle was painting with his dad, Spencer McMurray, and they would go paint with them. And it was the house, Clemens' house on Date. And this was not nice there. And she said they'd be painting and just kind of weird, somebody in a blue coat and stuff would just kind of, and it wasn't a good feeling. And pretty soon, they got to the point where they would only paint in a room together. They didn't want to be separated. And there was one corner that got really bad, so I don't know if Joni has stories about that.
I was hoping she'd come down. She was tired.
Yeah, because, but John did have a story about your house.
Well, hell, I want to hear that.
Yeah, I think you need to know. But he
The house I live in now.
He came down the stairs and he said there's somebody in a blue coat sitting to the right, I think, when he was coming down the stairs.
Was it, Nick had seen a Civil War guy in the
Yeah.
Union suit. And when we moved into the house, we found an etching, and we had built-ins, and we found an etching,
Glass stereotype.
a glass thing of a Civil War guy.
Oh,
So we're just putting,
might be the same one John saw.
and years ago, I dug out the basement, because, you know, I figured I needed a bar in the basement, hell, who don't? And so I'm digging out this basement, and in the corner of the kitchen, where the kitchen is now in the basement, she had a dog, and that dog come down there and barked and barked and barked at that corner, and as I'm digging, I'm going, damn, I'm gonna dig up a body here pretty soon. I kept digging, but that dog was sensing something in that corner and was barking and barking and barking. So, but that's the only thing I felt in the house. Have you felt anything? But most of the stuff happened in Nick. But he woke up one day in a certain bedroom. I used to take a nap in that bedroom, and we finally got one of them dream catchers. Just think maybe that would help. He woke up with somebody mushing his face,
Well,
and it wasn't me.
before you bought that house, we went.
Yeah, you said it freaked
We
you
went
out.
and looked at it, and I had the strangest feeling, and I said, I don't want this house, I wouldn't live in it.
So we bought
Why
the
didn't you
other
tell us?
house instead. Eventually.
I thought it was just me.
I thought maybe you'd say something. No, we love the house, and I haven't felt too much. Another thing with Nick, he was upstairs ripping out the carpet. My dad had just passed away, and he said and there was a picture of my dad above the window, and the window opened by itself, and it happened to Nick. So I asked Kenny about anything ever happened to you. Well, hell no. You know, Kenny's oblivious to anything, so nothing ever happened to him. How about you, Julie?
okay, I didn't wanna say anything, but, right after Grandpa had passed away, our grandpa always had like little jingles, or like he'd always just like walk by and play a little tune on the piano. And we used to wake up in the middle of the night with just like a few little keys being played on the piano. That always used to scare us. The basement was always super scary. Whenever Mom would be like, go downstairs and get something, we'd all run down there as fast as we could and then run all the way back up. Nobody liked going into the basement by themselves.
Yeah, I still don't. Basements, I don't like basements. Are you gonna tell anything about that house over there?
Well, not much to say about that house right
This
there.
is
No.
the
Yeah.
Hanley house.
Yeah.
Mrs. Hanley lived in this house. If you guys don't know who Bill Hanley was, a very
There's
famous
feelings
rancher
there.
around the area. But they bought this house over here, and her daughter lived in there.
Yeah, and nothing specific happened, just that feeling you get when you
Yeah.
go in there. And she and her husband was a firefighter, and she just had a baby, so she'd have to stay there by herself. And she would like shut the door and, you know, with her back to the wall, but she would feel almost like someone was right outside her door. But that was just all just a feeling. But I don't know if anyone's felt anything at the middle school. I swear, so Mr. Burns and myself have both heard our name and turned around and no one was there. And my daughter in her classroom sometimes has things moved around, and there was another teacher that had things moved around. I know I went to school there when I was a kid, and we always said it was haunted. But I don't know. I don't know if anybody
You
else.
believe that, huh?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Sure, why, I mean, I think everything's haunted.
But my not house story is I have the story. You guys blame.
I thought it was Glenn.
Yeah, you blamed him for not remembering it because
Okay.
it wasn't him.
And Glenn's looking at me, what the hell? you
But
doing?"
we were up at your cabin.
So it was on the 40.
Yes, we were up at your I don't know the roads. What road?
We're up the 41 road, close.
Yeah, and we were at part of the road where there was a little embankment, and I looked up, and it was probably 11 o'clock at night. It was late, and I saw what I thought I saw was a lady with her hair was down, and she had on this long lacy dress, and she was just walking along, and I just noticed her right when we drove by, and I turned around. And I go, did anybody see that? And Erin was sitting in the back, my daughter, and she goes, yeah, there's a lady in a white dress. So we both saw it, but she was gone.
So ever since then, going home from there, because we'd always go home by ourselves late at night, Julie'd say, they're always looking for this, freaking out. And maybe driving a little faster by that.
But we also found an oxen shoe and arrowhead chips at that same cut bank that you saw the lady in the white dress. So it could have been
Well,
a spot where
that's my theory of the Meeks Trail went up that way. And
people may have been
being
there
at
at
the
one
museum
time.
and a historian and trying to, I make up stuff. That's my story. The Meeks Trail went up there, and that's where this oxen thing was. Anyway, so we still worry about that. And a lot of times I go home late, and I think, damn, I hope I don't see this thing.
So when you talk about the Hanley house, are you talking about this one we can see out the window,
Yeah,
Cream colored one with the
Yeah.
red roof.
it's from like 1920 or something?
And I'm not so sure about the museum. I've had some strange things over there. I worked at the courthouse for 20 years, and I'd work late at night by myself. There was definitely
oh yeah.
some stuff going on there. I was there all by myself, and the damn elevator kept going up and down. So I'd go out in the parking lot, look around, and go, I'd turn all the lights in the courthouse, and it went up and down several times, and that was kind of unnerving. I felt it was the first sheriff in Harney County was haunting that place. And I'd be walking down the basement, I could hear, I'd stop and footsteps would go a little bit after I stopped, and then I always felt like that. But Shauna worked down there for 30-some years, and she thought it was
I
a
worked
woman.
in the basement of the courthouse in the bomb shelter for 40 years. And I always felt it was a woman that was mopping the floors. And you could
She
hear
was
her
helping me.
banging her bucket, but you'd go out in the hallway and there'd be nobody there and the floors would be bone dry. And then I could hear her in the restroom next to my office, like scrubbing and cleaning and banging and singing. And I'd go in the bathroom at night and there'd be nobody there, and I'd be like, okay, it must be time to go home. I called her Myrtle. She was real friendly, but I'd be like, okay, I got it, I'll go home now.
So I
It's-
started talking to the 911 people when they got cameras, and they said one evening up in the hallway, they seen a lady coming down the hallway and just disappearing, in no door, just in the wall. So all this is going on. They installed new cameras, and nobody told me that they could talk to me. So about 11 o'clock one night, them guys talked to me, and besides I had a heart attack, I said, if you ever talk to me again, I'm gonna rip that thing out of the wall. But if they knew how I felt about stuff, they wouldn't have been doing that.
Or maybe they would have.
Yeah, or maybe they would. So, any more stories around town? I know, Shauna, that house over there, you said that weird things over there.
I worked as an extension agent for 40 years here in Harney County, and I was teaching a group of young mothers with women, infant, and children in a home, and it's, I don't know what house it
It's
is.
that PLL, PS,
PLS,
that great big one.
PLS house.
Yeah,
It's
so-
the big White House,
Just
they're
over there.
a block up from the courthouse. And I was standing on the fireplace teaching, and the mothers were all sitting on the couches and chairs around me, and we were discussing. And I looked up, and this woman in an old dress, like a floor-length dress and big leg of muffin sleeves, just glides down the stairway. And then when she gets to the bottom of the stairs, she's just gone. And I was just like, okay, we're done. I'm going home now. It was,
But I've heard that house is really haunted.
yeah. And the people that lived there said that they felt like there was a presence there. And we all felt uncomfortable and went home right
You
away.
guys feel anything in your house? Nothing would freak you out.
No, I haven't noticed anything.
Because I drive by, go, that house is haunted. But my nephew,
But what house are you talking about, the White House from? Who lives in it now?
It's a woman
Mary
from Portland, but Bacchus lived there for a
Oh,
while.
oh, I knew
yeah.
that.
That big white
Yeah,
house.
Mary Ellen.
And,
Yeah,
yeah,
And they say that it was
Hannaford's lived
Harney.
there.
yeah.
yeah.
But there was a house over here that my sister Wendy and her family went and looked at where Carter's lived. And Mark walked in there, Mark Novak, and he walked in and goes, we can't live here. He felt it right away. He goes, we can't live here. And so they were looking at it. And I can't believe he thought that about our house and didn't say a damn thing.
It was just a feeling, I didn't see it.
No, it is a feeling.
Yeah.
Like he says back there, it is a feeling.
Yeah.
It's
Well, that's how we figured, I didn't know Aaron was going through stuff in this house, and when we were cleaning it on the last day, me and Aaron and Josh, her husband, were sitting there, and I said, you know what? I have always had the worst feeling that someone was watching me in the house. And they both immediately go, us too, and they hadn't even told each other. So none of us knew that, but we all had the same feeling.
And then I had another incident. Grandmother had passed away and we're down cleaning her house. And I was mowing the yard. And I'm just mowing along and I was just, hell, I'm gonna mow over the flowers. Well, something hit my leg to keep me from mowing over the flowers. And I went, oh, okay, I better stop that. And at the same time, I don't know if you talked to Wendy, but Wendy actually, when we were playing in it,
Yeah,
seen Grandma in the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah, I remember her saying.
But she kept me from running the flowers over, and
Yeah.
Wendy seen her actually,
Yeah.
in a much younger version. So
Right.
we're all hopeful. Hopefully, yeah. We- do you want to tell the other?
Yeah, so how many people here have ever eaten in the Ye Old Castle?
Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah, there's stories about the Ye Old Castle, and there's actually one
Yeah.
that's published in a book here. And in the book, they talk about, I'm just gonna read it. The Ye Old Castle is an odd combination restaurant and antique emporium, and many people love the collection of objects displayed as much as they do as the restaurant. It is not the prettiest eatery in town, but is certainly the most unique and quite possibly the most haunted. Though not much is known about the history of the building, it dates back to the mid-late 1800s when it was a private home and sits less than 2 miles from 3 cemeteries. the Burns Cemetery, the Paiute Cemetery, and the Burns Paiute Cemetery. Located on West Monroe Street, Yield Castle is a good-sized restaurant that could seat up to 120 people. Locals love the 1950s style home cooking, and tourists cannot resist the allure of the odd-looking building, the collection of antique toys and bicycles, and the ghost stories. The restaurant has not changed much over the years and retains its retro feel with shag-carpeted restrooms and old, long-used booths. It features basic breakfast and lunch fare that is good as Grandma used to make, especially the pies that will leave your mouth watering for more. While you're waiting for your meal, you'll be entertained by the antique bicycles, toys, paintings, and everything in between. There is no skimping on flavor or the past. While people claim to have seen more than one ghost in Yield Castle, the one reported most often is a younger woman in a period blue dress. Many say she was a resident of the building when it was a private residence and passed away there, while others say she was the friend of a previous owner whose life was cut short by cancer. Whoever she is reported to have a motherly and compassionate presence, and she has left witnesses scratching their heads over her identity for decades. Usually witnesses see the woman in blue from the corner of their eye, and then as a full-bodied apparition when they turn to look at her, after which she makes eye contact and then quickly disappears. But those who have seen the azure apparition say that even though she disappears, her presence is still felt strongly in the room, as though she remains incognito, watching the customers and staff and their goings-on. People see her more often when workers are repairing or painting the building, which theory says is common for ghosts who have an emotional attachment to a location. They have remained as they were when they died and expect their homes to remain the same as well. Some ghosts may not comprehend that they are deceased and do not understand why strangers are changing their homes. Whatever the cause in the case of the Yield Castle, the woman in blue does not seem to mind being seen. She seems to genuinely care about what happens in the restaurant and appears to have a motherly affection for those who dine and work there. Does anybody know
Well,
anybody that's
remember,
heard or seen
Our
anything there?
mother worked there, and Sharon Ashcraft would tell my mother that upstairs was, and Ashcrafts owned it back in the late 60s. So our families connect all kinds of ghosts. But anyway, my mother would hear Sharon say, wow, this place is really haunted, because they lived upstairs. Yeah. And all I cared about was in the 60s, it was a buffet, and my mother worked there, so I could eat at buffets. I would go through the ghost stories to get to the buffet.
Well, I do have another story to tell, but it's not really like a ghost story, it's more like a religious experience.
Yeah, you should
Calls
tell
it
that.
his guardian angel.
I was going to work one day, we were logging up out of Riley, and I was going along about 70 miles an hour, and I dropped down, and before I got to the first bridge, I seen this guy up there waving his hands, and he had a light with a cone on it, and my first thought, damn, there's been a wreck. And I start slowing down, and when I go past him, he's a black man, he had a bright blue parka on, and he watched me go by like that, with his head. And I got to the bridge, and it was plumb full of deer. You couldn't have got another deer in there. And I had to just kind of idle through them. I think I could have got out and walked among them.
So
But
he
then
pre-warned
I
you.
looked back to where that guy was, he wasn't there.
Ah.
He always felt he saved him from crashing into those deer.
Yeah.
'Cause
Well, maybe he was saving the
170. Speeding.
Any other stories out there? Go ahead. Yeah.
To this day, I have something in my closet. Every time I go to bed, but not every day, every night. Doesn't happen every night. But when it does happen, I have a dog that now sleeps with me because he will freeze every time something is in my closet. And the dogs, I have 2 dogs that have seen or felt something in the closet, and they just freeze. And I say, what's the matter, what's the matter? And they just are so scared. And now I just say, well, don't be afraid, it's just a ghost.
I think animals sense it, dogs and sense. I see our dog just looking over sometimes at something. What the heck, we're looking at.
What part of town do you live in?
On Court Street, across from Safeway and down that way.
Is it up on the hill in the old part of town?
No, it's nearer to the railroad
Oh.
avenue.
Interesting.
Any other stories out there? Go ahead.
I got one. We lived when we were first married in a house on Newport, and it was an old Heinz house, so there was the lower level and then the upper level. And he probably will get mad at me for telling this part, but he would often wake up in the middle of the night, and when we slept upstairs, he would wake up and feel like something was pushing on his chest. And then we had our daughter, and when she was, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3, then she had this friend. His name was Buddy, and he was not nice, real mean, and would like just real mean. She had a lot of stories about him, and we moved when right after we had Liam, about 6 months after we had Liam, so Paige was 3, and after we moved from that house, never again did she ever have a story about Buddy.
Who lives in that house now?
I don't know who lives there, do you?
I mean, don't go tell them.
Yeah, I don't know who lives there now.
And I think certain people bring that stuff out. I mean, we certainly do, I guess. I mean, but
When I go into a house, whether in several that we moved, I'll sit there and, okay, do I feel anything?
yeah.
You know, so.
Well, Nick moved into Dennis Bennett's old house, and the Bennetts were there years ago. Family grew up in that house, and he feels something in that house. And he had a friend come over and, what do you call it, sage it or whatever. And I go, why not? Because he said he'd come out and the rocking chair would be rocking. So there's something, and that house was built in late 1800s, the main part. But he felt something in there, and I said, yeah, if you believe, try something. So he says there's something in that house too, but he's feeling stuff also. And like I said, not Kenny doesn't, and I don't know if Julie does sometimes, but some of us maybe just making stuff up.
So I have another story, if nobody has anything right now, about a house down on Riverside. And this is a story that I found in our historic house information, and it was written up by a former resident of the house and submitted by someone named Robin Baker. And I don't know who this is, but the title of it is called Spooky Incidents at Rental House. And this house was located on Riverside, right down at the end of the street, right next to the river. And she says, I believe we moved into the house about 1973. My best recollection was that the owner lived in John Day. 2 adults, 3 children, and a dog. The house was old, maybe built in the 40s. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, family room, kitchen, and a utility room added on the side porch. There was a detached 1-car garage that sat between the house and the riverbank. A fence with a walk-through gate and a large opening for the driveway ran along the property facing the street. The family that had just moved out of the house, last name of Uffelman, had a small dog that either came back to the house or never left when they moved. He was in the yard for about 2 weeks after we moved in, wouldn't let anyone near him. He stayed in the front yard, right under a large tree near the edge of the yard near the street. All day and most of the night, he sat under the tree and barked and howled, as though something was up in the tree. Finally, the wife of the family came and got him. She told us his name was Darby. Weird, huh? After about 2 months of living there, we hired a babysitter one evening and went out to a party. We got home about midnight to find the babysitter, the 3 kids, and the dog sitting on the front steps. They said they were in the living room watching TV when suddenly the room got very cold. Then the beaded curtain that hung in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen started swinging back and forth like someone was pushing it from side to side. They went outside and locked the door so whatever was in the house couldn't get out to them. It took us quite a while of reassuring them before they would go back in the house. The kids complained of not feeling comfortable in the house almost daily. They refused to stay alone, day or night. I believe it was several weeks later that I was sleeping in the master bedroom. Bev was at work and the kids were in bed. I'm not sure if this was an actual experience or if I dreamed it. It felt very real at the time. The room suddenly got very cold. I got out of bed, was standing in the doorway, and felt a very strange presence near me. It was as though I was being moved against my will. All I could think to do or say was something Mom told us years ago. I said, "Satan, get behind me." At that, everything stopped. The cold was gone. The feeling was gone too, except I was cold, shaky, and scared spitless. Didn't get any sleep the rest of the night for sure. The bedroom that the kids were in was small and had a built-in closet. It had 2 windows that faced out into the backyard. We painted the room after moving in, and I remember the door and window moldings were all scarred on the edges, like someone had used a wood rasp on the edge of the trim, but very uneven. We had lots of problems with the roof leaking and couldn't get the landlord to do anything about it, so we moved out after a year or so. The family that rented the house later were good friends of ours, Jim and Dee Sutton, and their 2-year-old daughter, Leah. This was in the early spring of 1977. I think we even helped them move their furniture into the house. Jim told me that the first thing he had to do was build a fence along the riverbank to make it safe for Leah to play out there. He worked on it all day and had it almost completed except for a few feet at the end. He intended to get up early the next morning and finish it. Leah was sleeping in the small bedroom in her crib. Dee told us she had never gotten out of the crib before. When Jim and Dee got up the next morning, Leah was not in the crib or in the house. The back door was open a little, and it wasn't long before Jim found Leah floating in the river. They were just devastated at the loss of their only child. Several days later, Bev mentioned to Dee about the strange occurrences we had experienced. Dee was a person who had a strong belief in communicating with the spirit world. About a week later, she told Bev that she had talked with the spirit of a very young girl that had died in the house years ago. The spirit spent a lot of time in the big tree in the front yard. That had been a favorite play place when she was alive. The spirit also told Dee that she had been locked in the back bedroom for long periods because her family was ashamed of her for being mentally retarded. She told Dee that she was an only child and wanted another child for a friend and playmate. Dee was convinced that the spirit had helped Leah get out of the crib and led her to the river so she could have a playmate. I think I heard several years later that Jim and Dee separated over the loss of their only child. Leah is buried in the Burns Cemetery. No date of birth and no headstone.
Well, that's an awful story.
Yeah.
Wait, which house is that, Karen?
I think that's house burned down.
You
Is
think
it
it did?
Robinson's? It sounds
I
like
don't
it
know,
was
I don't know who's,
Robinson's.
but we moved here in 95,
Uh-huh.
and since 95, that house burned down.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had a gentleman from Idaho
Yeah,
come visit
straight on the
today doing some family research. And we got to talking and he was telling me about some of the places where his relatives lived. And he said when he was very young, because they only lived here for about a year, they lived in what I'm pretty sure is that house. He said right next to the river down at the end of Riverside. And his aunt and uncle also ran a boarding house in the old castle building before it became a restaurant.
There was 2
So I thought
houses
that was
down
kind of weird coincidence.
there. There was a house right next to Robinson's. So it might have been that one. Yeah, that's a terrible story. And getting back to our house, we've bought a few rentals over the years, and that house come up. Well, Sean, let's go, and I'm kinda apprehensive, okay, let's go look at this for a rental, maybe. We look at it, and she goes, well, you're not gonna live in there, and I go, yeah, but I might have to come fix something in there, so I'm not interested. I'd have to go in that basement.
Yeah.
Was the house by the fairgrounds that Mom and Dad lived in, was that mine?
Yeah. But,
Called it the old whorehouse.
yeah,
So the big white one?
yeah, the house of little repute.
Yeah.
I think that. there was a
Yeah, and
dairy
I
there.
understand the folks that are in there now. But we were so used to haunts, I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
I believe it was, yeah. I don't remember anything,
We just
but we
wanted
were
friendly.
kinda used to it, you know, by then.
Well, then people that bought it after you, when you guys sold it, he says every once in a while I hear a door slam upstairs and he call me Maggie or something.
Yeah, well, yeah, when we moved in, they still had the numbers on the doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another story in another book, and I'm not gonna read this one, but, it actually talks about, there's a house on, I think it's West Arthur, which is kind of across from the fairgrounds, and, there was a Harry Potter lived in that house with his son Jim and his wife, and after Harry's
You know
wife
Harry.
passed away, Jim and Harry both encountered apparitions, for lack of a better word,
Harry
in the
Potter
house.
had the used bookstore.
The Moonrise books, yeah.
Yes, Moonrise Books right behind you, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and then in talking to someone else here in town, she remembered some earlier residents of that house, and within a succession of several years, there were 3 different owners of that same house who had passed away. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Ah, stay away from that
But,
house.
yeah, one of the encounters, they saw like glowing orbs in the house.
That's real.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
See one.
That really does happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Has anybody heard about the French Glen Hotel being haunted?
No,
Or known anybody that stayed there?
I've stayed there when I was a kid, but I don't remember anything
Yeah.
strange happening.
Yeah, I ran across a story, there was a writer from the Oregonian who did a write-up on the history of the French Glen Hotel. And he mentioned in his story that Ken Pruitt, who was one of the former managers of the hotel, back in the 1970s, he passed away. In his obituary, it said of an apparent heart attack. But the story that the writer heard was that Pruitt was attempting to give himself an appendectomy, which seems like a kind of a weird thing to do, but, and then ever since that happened, people have reported, strange sounds and things going on in some of the rooms upstairs.
Okay, anybody else got anything creepy out there?
I got one last thing.
Okay,
Speaking of other haunted hotels and stuff, I've also lived in Baker City, just a few hours outside of town.
Is it the geyser?
Yes, the guys are great. Yeah, very top room, a older woman hung herself from the chandelier.
is that the room we stayed in?
That was the room we stayed in.
Can you let me stay in there?
Happy birthday to you.
Did you see her?
Did not.
There's that hotel and
Oh, yeah.
there's actually another one in Bend. I don't know if anyone's heard of the McMinimans.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Old elementary school in Bend.
Hmm.
It's now a movie theater and motel. Motel, whichever one, for the same thing. That building is also haunted, and I have stayed in there, and I've also watched movies in there, and it's not, there's one hall, it's not a pleasant hall to be in. As soon as you step foot within the first 2 rooms of that hallway, you can immediately feel that something
And so when you feel that, do you stay actually? Just-
No, I didn't stay in that hallway at all.
Yeah,
I
if
stayed.
I'd have known about that room, I said, no, we're out of here.
Yeah, I stayed in the other end because I didn't want to deal with any more ghostly stuff.
Yeah, no, agreed. I'm sure there's a lot more houses, yeah, over
Is
there.
there any stories about the old courthouse and the jail? The one just right off Main Street?
I haven't heard of it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law.
Are you the one that lives up the street or your daughter?
The what? She
Is
lives.
that house, all right? I shouldn't even ask that, that's terrible to ask, because that's a really historical house.
Yeah, we haven't had anything.
Okay, well, no, I don't wanna,
Sorry.
I don't wanna make you feel like, no, I haven't heard anything down there, but I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's a ton of stories, I hope at some point we get them all out. And we didn't have any idea what kind of crowd would show up, because it's such an odd thing to be talking about. But she said, did you tell me that we had something in the 90s, 2009, that the paranormal people come into town?
I remember, and you know, time goes by way too fast, but sometime before like 2020, I know there was some kind of a film crew or group of people who came here to Burns and they were looking for haunted houses to document.
And then they went up to Sumter and documented a bunch up there.
I don't know where they
At
went.
the same
To
time.
get
Yeah.
primed up last night, I watched that all night. Which is stupid, because I didn't
Yeah.
sleep then, but.
Yeah. And I ran across another story that somebody had happened to them at the Burns Cemetery.
Oh, yeah, I wanted you to tell me.
Yeah. So this was just submitted by a resident of Burns, no name. It said, I've been told the Burns Cemetery was haunted. Several of my late family members are laid to rest there, and I drove past it every single day, both daytime and nighttime. I never saw anything out of the ordinary until one day. It was in the summer of 2014 when I went to visit a relative's grave. I brought some flowers. I parked my car and started to walk in there. Then out of nowhere, I saw an odd couple walking in front of me just less than 100 yards. I thought I just wasn't noticing my surroundings. It looked like they had just arrived as well because they were just walking in like me, but I didn't see any car parked. It had been quite a while since I came into the cemetery, so I was lost and couldn't find my way to my relative's grave. I kept walking and looking at the gravestones, reading the names. Then again, all out of a sudden, there appeared the odd couple I had seen earlier. They were again about 100 yards from me. This time they turned left onto a small walkway. I decided to follow them because they were heading towards the section I hadn't checked out yet. I thought maybe I would find my relative's grave there. Then there it was, my relative's grave. By this time the couple had disappeared. I laid the flowers there. I looked to my left, and there were the gravestones right next to my relatives, read a couple of names. Maybe they were helping me find my way.
Ann has more than that.
You got more to share? She says you do.
We got cut off because my mother-in-law,
Oh. Well, Joy used to work at that building, and they said they would hear stuff and feel cold spots. I just didn't know if there was more stories that anybody knew about. So.
I haven't read any about that building.
What building is it?
You're talking about the one that's Country Natural Beef or whatever now?
Because I went down.
Jail used to be in the basement.
Old jail.
Yeah, and the library used to be in there on the main
Oh,
floor at
really?
one time.
Yeah. In the courtroom and,
City Hall too, that was City Hall, was it?
yeah,
I always heard that was haunted.
yeah.
Hmm.
And you ever notice the cemetery if you go by in the summer? This is just me. It's really cold when you go by the cemetery. Because I used to ride a motorcycle and God, you go by the cemetery, it's just freezing. Well, yeah, there are all those souls
All
in
that
there.
cold energy.
And I didn't really like hearing that story because I spent a lot of time at the cemetery.
Yeah.
Not that I'm weird, on the cemetery board, but I spent a lot of time up there. So, and I noticed last year it was a homeless guy, and he was staying the night there. And I went over there. Are you out of your mind? Can't you find somewhere else? He goes, no, I feel comfortable here. So he would spend the night at the cemetery. Okay, like, that's not something I'd probably do.
Walk through there as a teenager at night.
Yeah.
Jimmy, I will say though, the cemetery, if you people have an opportunity to just walk the cemetery, do it. I try to do it, a couple times a month,
Yeah.
just to walk around. There's so much history there. It is so cool. And especially the first hill right there.
Yeah.
And walking through there, I have a number of photos of headstones that are just, they're artistic, there's stories behind them. It's a wonderful place to go.
Yeah, and I get both ways, so I work at the museum, and so I see these people, and I read their names, and then I go up there and go, oh, I know who this was. So no, cemetery's great, it's a really pretty cemetery.
It's a beautiful cemetery.
Yeah, for the size of town and what they do, it's really nice, yeah.
Yeah, one of the neatest headstones up there is John Devine's,
Yeah.
the monument to John Devine. And he actually died here in town in 1901 on a Friday the 13th. And he
Oh,
died
wow.
in the hotel that sat in the location where the Whittier Hotel is right now.
Yeah. And he's a real colorful.
So we're hoping Beryl will see his ghost someday.
Oh, I hope so. I totally hope
He's gotta
so.
be here somewhere.
Yeah, he's gotta be in that place. Anyway, you got any more stories? 'Cause
Has anybody got some Sasquatch stories?
now getting on to that,
That's another
we
program.
talked about this because we wasn't sure if somebody'd bring up the cow mutilations or, UFO stories. But I'm not against having one of those, actually. But we'd have to research it out a little bit. Is anybody interested in that kind of stuff? Want to go over that?
Okay.
And either one, I mean, we won't have to put them together, but, and
There's UFO stories.
Yeah.
UFO stories, and of course, I've seen both, but.
I was gonna ask you kind of sarcastically when we before we got started.
Yeah, no,
If you
yeah,
ever
I'm
seen
just-
any UFOs.
Maybe I do make up some, I don't know. But yes, we have, I think it was me and my mom and Wendy that had it out in
Well, and,
middle of the desert with
yeah,
the UFO
Glenn
thing.
has had those
Yeah.
too.
So we're gonna try another program on that, if anybody's interested.
Yeah. And there are some articles, in the newspaper from years ago of people seeing weird
In the
lights
county,
and things
that
too.
was going on when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So either, I don't know what's going on there, but that could be a whole different story.
That'd be a good
The Harney Triangle.
Yeah. And our local archaeologist here, so if you want a story on that kind of thing, we could have those. We have several over the years, but any kind of story, either they can do it here, or we'll do it at the Elks or at the museum, but we try to do these monthly or every other month functions like this because it's fun. So if you have some idea, maybe let Cheryl know or Karen, and we'll maybe put it on some program that you're interested in. I know everybody likes the archaeology stuff.
I have a story. I went to do my dishes, wash them, and I have a big window above my sink in the kitchen. And I was just washing away and stuff, and I suddenly saw a car go by. And it was silver. And I was really surprised because, and then I started thinking, there's no road into where they were going, and it just, and I thought, there's no tires. And so, next thing you know, it disappeared. And this all happened in about 5 seconds.
And where do you live at?
Huh?
Court?
What?
South Court?
South Court,
Did it go by that down there?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then recently, I saw the same thing going across the same path. When I looked out the door that time, as that sliding doors. And I was just looking out the door, and then the same area, 4 ribbons or streaks of red, and they were big and, bountiful, they weren't, skinny or anything. They went and flew, they were on the ground, up on the ground, and they flew into the trees and was gone. And that was right by my house.
No South Court.
No, sorry.
Okay, like I said, if you got an idea for a program, let us know, and thank you all for coming. Yeah.